Welcome back, everybody. You're listening to Cut the Shit, a podcast series that aims to take a closer look at the impact of the IT industry, both the good and the bad. Cut the Shit is brought to you by Plow Networks, a managed IT services company based just outside Nashville, Tennessee. I'm Bryan, EVP of Products and Services here at Plow, and I'll be your host for this series. I'll ask questions, and with the help of our guests, try to dig deep on some of the key challenges we all face dealing with IT. So with that, let's cut the shit and get started. On today's episode, I am super excited to have Alex Ochoa as our guest. Alex is a former professional baseball player and coach, and he currently works as a player agent for the premier baseball talent management group, the Scott Boras Agency. After being drafted by the Orioles in the third round of the 1991 draft, Alex spent the next 18 years playing pro ball in both the MLB and the Japanese major leagues. After retiring, he coached and worked in the front office for an organization, and then moved on to work in his current role with the Boras Agency. During our conversation, we dive into the impact that technology has had on Major League Baseball, both from Alex's perspective as a player and a coach. We get into how technology has impacted the way players and coaches work together up and down Major League organizations, the cultural impact that the analytics movement has had on baseball, and how the use of mobile technology and wearables continues to evolve and impact the game. We talk about the way players assess themselves and the way organizations continue to assess players, and how managing the information explosion around all this is becoming a critical skill. Finally, I get Alex to speculate on what regular businesses can learn from the way pro sports are leveraging technology to find and develop talent. I hope you enjoy my conversation with Alex Ochoa. Alex Ochoa, welcome to the Cut the Shit podcast. How you doing, man?
How you doing? Thanks, Bryan. How you doing?
Doing okay. It's been a while. I think we got together right before COVID, if I remember correctly. I think the day before the emergency thing, when I think it was like March 12th, 2020, right? So
yeah, no doubt.
It's hard to believe.
It's crazy how that is.
Since then, you've had, I think, 2 kids, or did you already had one, or one was on the way?
Well, we had one, and then
you had another, like
11 days old or whatever, and then
That's right.
And then we had another one in 2021. No, 2021. Yeah, 2021.
Awesome. Yeah. So, yeah, they give you plenty. You were at home, so you might as well play with little kids, right? So.
No doubt. No doubt. I found the special lady, and then we went from there. It took me a while, but everything happens in its due time, right?
That's right. Well, listen, thanks off for joining. I think we'll have an interesting conversation today. I've already told in the intro that you and I go back a ways. You were a much better baseball player than I was, and made it a lot farther and turned it into a really interesting career that I think is a nice setup for today's conversation. Since you're not in the technology business, you probably, I remember when I first asked you about this, you were like, what the hell are you even asking me for? But I think the applications of technology in all kinds of places are super interesting, and hopefully this will be a good learning experience for, again, we don't have one customer in the sports business at all, right? But there's stuff that's happened in professional baseball specific to technology that I think could be instructive and informative to the group. So thanks for taking time. I know it's getting busy with the fall because you got your guys in and that kind of thing. So we'll try to make it substantive. So
I appreciate having me, Bryan. It's a pleasure, actually.
But before we dive in, why don't you, if you could just give us, before we get into kind of the technology stuff, you had a long career in pro ball, and then coach, and now work in kind of the scouting, the agent side of the business. Give me like a story from back in the early days that is the opposite of a technology story, like something that, you knew you were in an old school business when, because I can think of like 3 or 4 different things, like from the early days and when we were in the Orioles organization, like some of the stuff they did that I thought was, we weren't that exposed to what was going on in the front office and the coaching staff, but just in general, the way we did things. So something sort of very old school from your career. And maybe it was later where things were changing technologically, but it was something that was so old school. You were like, wow, I can't believe that they're still doing it this way. It doesn't have to have anything to do with technology, just sort of process in general.
I just think, like, at least stuff that I remember, like, I remember like going to pro baseball, and like I remember having that one cage that we only had in in spring training, um, uh, just doing a lot of like small things like hitting off the tee, or kind of soft toss, but not really cage work,
Yeah.
which is very prevalent today, in different aspects. I was thinking about when we played at Frederick, we didn't even have a. I mean, our cage was up on the hill. I mean, I don't
Yeah.
remember hitting in the cage.
No, never.
Oh,
Yeah. I don't either. Yeah.
I don't remember hitting it. Somebody asked me, one of our younger clients asked me about that, and I was like, man, we didn't even have. Well, first of all, we didn't even have a hitting coach.
No. Well, I mean, you remember who it was? Do you remember? It was Wally Moon was the traveling hitting coach. He was 132 years old, I'm pretty sure, at that time. And he seemed like he was maybe 150. I mean,
I know. Yeah, no.
He was old for his age, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah, no doubt. And then it really came in once in a blue moon, but just like old school things like that don't happen today. Now they have hitting coaches in every league. They have hitting coordinators. Now they have an assistant hitting coordinators. It's just the game has transformed a ton. We're gonna get into technology.
Yeah.
And but even in the coaching aspect has changed a ton. They're using stuff. We just had batting practice. We didn't have anything else. Now they use machines in batting practice to simulate speed.
Okay.
Just a ton of things that are just totally different to when we were in the minor leagues. And communication. Another thing, communication is big now. Even even in younger minor leaguers, communication with the coaches, communication with the coordinators. I mean, I can't remember me having like an in-depth conversation other than with my teammates about adjustments, about anything like that with coaches.
Every once in a while, again, if someone showed up, but then it was sort of like a drive-by, like, okay, like, I mean, somebody would show up, watch one game, they wouldn't have seen any kind of a totality of experience. They just watched you one night, maybe had a good night or a bad night, that kind of thing. Or they'd see the numbers. Oh, he's 0 for 16, so he must be struggling. You need some help. It was that kind of a thing. It was not consistent in any way.
Anyway, no, I mean, I just think that never in depth. Like I remember, my first full year was 1992, and I was in Kane County, Illinois, cold. Never played in the cold weather as a young kid, and that being a big adjustment. And I remember I was hitting like a 140 the first month in the season, and
you're freezing your ass off too. You've been in Miami your whole life, right? I mean, you never played anywhere but it was cold. It was 60, 62 degrees. You're like, man, I'm getting out the turtleneck.
Yeah, exactly. I remember bunting a couple times during BP because it was so cold. And Wally Moon coming in, and basically the conversation was, don't worry, kid. When it starts getting hot, you'll get better. That was
the advice. Yeah, that's some of that.
Of the conversation about, it wasn't about hitting. It wasn't about, I'm sure it was something, he probably mentions a little bit short, but that really stuck out of my mind, right?
Yeah.
It was no in-depth thing that I'll just figure it out.
I think that's a really good place to kind of jump in, because I do think you've watched an industry really transform before your very eyes, right? In a span of 20 years, right? Just over 20 years, which is a very short period of time, right? I mean, that's not long. Now, baseball, professional sports in particular, and baseball for sure, 20 years is a long time, right? If you think about it, if you go to 1975 to 1995. I mean, you think about the business model just in and of, I mean, there was no free agency. I mean, there's, on and on. You can go on, and these changes we're talking about, I'm sure the way they did things in 1975 probably seemed like the Stone Age compared to the things we're describing, right? Which was, in the early 90s. But regardless, that's ancient history. Now we're just talking about past history, which is still fairly ancient. And I think a lot of that has been fueled by technology. Some of what you're talking about, the reason they didn't do it, some of it might have just been they were hard-headed and used to doing things a certain way, but some of it was hard to do, right? I mean, feedback loops were not as easy as they are now with what you can do with technology. So I want to jump in on one thing first from a technology standpoint, and then we'll kind of build from there. And that was when you go back to your playing days, when was the first time you remember using video technology to look at your own performance? Like in any kind of significant way, because we didn't do that at all in the minors. There was no access. And so I'm guessing for you, it had to either be later in your minor league career or when you got to the big leagues.
Very good question. I would have to say
I'm not fact checking you either. So it's, if it just whenever it jumps in your mind,
on about time. I would have to say my 4th year in the majors.
So it was a while.
It was a while.
Okay. So you broke in was it 95?
95. I got my first taste in the big leagues, and 96 was my rookie year.
Okay.
So
you're talking 98?
98.
99?
99, maybe.
And I'm assuming these were VHS tapes somebody was recording. Was someone in the clubhouse or,
VHS recording. We had to go play it back. I remember because it was a transformation actually to I had my rookie year. I had a good year. I struggled the following year, and then I struggled again after that. And then in 99, it was 99, I had a hitting coach, Jim Lefevre, that really took to me and worked with me every day in spring training. I remember him telling me, "Hey, you have too much talent to have done what you've done the last couple of years." And he went in, and he would tell me, we went into the cage early in the mornings every day, and then he's the one that really first one to give me like video feedback on
show you what you're doing, right? As opposed to you having to visualize it in your mind, because that's what it was for us, right? They'd say, "Oh, you're doing X or Y," and you had to feel it or sort of picture it in your brain. That was it.
Yeah, exactly. And then what technology, I think my opinion, what technology did is like actually, you can talk about it, show you, and then break it down in the sense of what are you doing that makes you successful. Where before it was a feel.
Yep.
The field still, you need the field still, but when you're looking at it, you can grasp the feel of it faster.
Sure. Yeah, it's a feedback loop. I mean, it's for you to, it feels funny, but if it's working, then you can adjust it in your mind to be like, to train yourself for that to feel right. I mean, I don't want to get off topic, but this whole idea of launch angle and some other things that happened, like that never would have happened, I don't think, without analytics and video technology, because it's counterintuitive to a certain degree, right? You wouldn't have thought of, you would not, and it would have felt wrong for the most part for the way you were taught to hit, and for good reasons, right? Line drives in a lot of ways make the most sense in baseball in terms of the swing plane, all those kinds of things in terms of maximizing the likelihood of hitting a ball hard, right? So none of that would have happened, I don't think, without the ability to have the feedback loops and to be able to then retrain your brain to a certain degree to change that feeling in that sense. That's interesting because I'm thinking about this in the context because I left baseball in 93, I was gone way before it got to that point. But there's no doubt that people were doing that already in other sports, particularly like golf, other things. But it didn't happen. It feels like it happened a little bit later in baseball. But then once it started, it feels like my sense is that it dramatically accelerated. And so as you think about it, so your first take, say 98, 99, video technology, old school VHS, rewinding a tape, how much longer before you had an iPad that you were carrying with you as a player, and after a game, they were uploading the videos for you to see, like what they do with Huddle now for it's down in the high school level now. Like everybody can see. You never see it. You probably don't have it at bat anymore that you don't get to watch 8,000 times, right? And that never existed, just a generation ago. So how much long? What was the gap between where you got to that point?
Okay. So I got to go then after. Obviously, I had a little bit of the VHS stuff till 2002. Then I ended up going to Japan. Their technology was their video and technology was a little bit more advanced than what I was
Okay, I was going to ask you, was it different in Japan, better or worse? I was curious about that. So
it was more. They never. How do I put it? It wasn't individualized in the sense of like one-on-one. We always have meetings every day. There was meetings, hitting meetings, watching pitchers, watching hitters. They had a hitters meeting and a pitchers meeting, all video. All video. We watched the pitchers pitch. We watched the pitchers pitch against us individually as a group, obviously, with especially the main guys that played every day. So then you would get that visual, but not one-on-one. I think for me, where I saw a huge change was when my first year coaching 2009 with the Red Sox. It was the first time I could see they started with you can watch a video of your at bat a minute after your at bat was done, right? So you were able to go hit, go back down,
and watch
your at bat, what you did, where the pitch was, all that stuff. So that's when I think from 2009 to what it is now, it's accelerated at like warp speed, I would say.
So I'm guessing now most players, I mean, they can see it in the clubhouse, but my guess is that when they go home, if they want to watch their at-bats, they can access that.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah, I mean, and I would imagine hitting coaches are looking at those videos and providing feedback to them at various points.
Exactly. Well, you see them as a dugout, you see them now watching at-bats, watching the pitcher on an iPad. Every single player has that, you know. So kind of like what it evolved because I was coaching from 2009 and 2012. So I got to see even in a short period of time from 2009 because I was a big league coach my first year, and then I became a big league coach again my second year in between being special assistant to baseball operation and a hitting coach in low A ball, and then just watching everything like accelerate in that short span, right? Which is cool because I got to see that in the major leagues, how it advanced, then go back to the minor leagues and watch how that has transformed as well. You have a video guy in every level.
Yeah, I'm sure. I mean, you'd be crazy not to, right? I mean,
so they instant feedback. You can log into your the minor leagues is slower, right? It's a little was slower. I don't know. Probably it's more advanced now. Probably you could get it similar to 2009 probably, but back then it was like, okay, you had to wait for a couple of days, and then they downloaded all the things, and then you could go back and watch your at-bats in the minor leagues. And I think in that aspect, I think 2010, 11 was kind of like the years that you could that I experienced that. So
so that, you know, I think again to think back to the early days where what we struggled with was no feedback, right? Lack of feedback, either video, there was no technology feedback. There wasn't really any coaching feedback. Like it kind of felt like the idea was, and they didn't say this, but it sort of seems like this when thinking about our experience in the minors. I mean, mine and yours weren't the same, but they were the same in certain regards. We're in the same organization. And it was a fairly, you know, forward-thinking organization, I would say, compared to some, when I talk to guys from other organizations. But it sort of seemed like the idea was, we'll put you out there and let you play, and the guys who can figure it out are the ones who are going to make it. And if you can't, then too bad for you, right? It was it was a bit of a, I mean, not just a bit of it, it was very much a sink or swim model, right? Very individualistic in that sense that the idea of coaching wasn't really, they maybe give you a little help, but in general, you were supposed to just figure it out. And now it feels like it's the opposite now, as it should be. I mean, I don't think that was right. I think having more help, having more coaching, having more feedback, all those things are good. But it does make me think, and now that you're on the agency side and you deal with current players, how much information overload are they dealing with? And because we certainly didn't have that problem. I mean, you could get in your own head in 1991, 92, 93, for sure. That not saying that, but it wasn't that you weren't bombarded with information or worried that you weren't doing enough video work or all of the potential that feel like potential issues now? I'm just curious to hear what the young guys, how do they talk about that?
I think a lot of times there's a lot of overload, a lot of things that sometimes I think as an I would hate to say, like, I think of old school, like, because I think I'm of a person that would change with time, very good, and I don't like, I'm not against. There's some people that are so totally against analytics. I'm not against it. I think more information to a certain extent is good, but how, and when certain situations that doesn't apply at all, because as a field game, I think hitting becomes it's sometimes it's feel. So like I think a lot of things of mechanics and things like that, and breaking down totally the mechanics, and just puts too much thought into in players' minds, so they become mechanical, not instinctual.
Yeah.
And a lot of times you have to allow that to flourish as well.
I would agree. Yeah. I mean, and again, yeah, I'm old too and left the game a long time ago. But, when I think about it, yeah, obviously more information is better just if you're going to just draw a line. Do you want more information or less? Well, you'll take more, right? But you can have too much information too, because it becomes hard to know what's signal and what's noise, right? How do you sort that out? And, being in a slump is no different in 2022 as it was in 1912, right? Where it feels like you just can't figure it out. Like you can't, nothing's working. You can't see the ball well. You can't recognize a pitch. When you do hit a ball hard, it's right at somebody, and it's like, well, shit, it's still an out. Even now, and at least now with modern day analytics, they'll give you, you get some credit for that. You smoke a line drive at the center fielder, like that goes a little bit in the plus column, whereas in our day it's just 0 for 1. Like that's better. But the bottom line is it still doesn't feel any good when you're 0 for 17 and you just lined out again. Now you're 0 for 18. I mean, it still sucks. So,
and they try to kind of like, which I get it. And nowadays they try to, a 240. There's a hard 240 and a not good 240. But it's 240 anyways, right?
Yeah.
And try to like obviously, kind of reward guys for let's say they hit the ball hard that year and things like that. But baseball is so so it's such an up and down thing that's not really like a measure, because you can't see it, you can't feel it. So your mind has to change completely, and that's hard to do.
Well, and at the end of the day, if you're the GM of an organization where a bunch of guys hit the ball hard and you still lose, like, you're going to get fired. I mean, now, again, the idea of if you the belief, and it's true, over time, if you hit the ball hard more frequently than you don't, right, good things will happen, right? But how long, right? There's that can go for a long time, right? That doesn't even out in a span that always lines up with, particularly. I mean, I think about A-Rod and his quote unquote inability to perform in the playoffs, right? And yeah, over time, cumulatively, his hitting record was poor in the playoffs. But as you know, like the playoffs are a weird thing, and they're basically a bunch of individual games or short series, right? Where depending on how you're hitting, I mean, there are guys who are great in the playoffs who are just not that good they really aren't that good at hitters. Are they really good hitters because they were good in the playoffs? Or, are they just really special? No, Billy Beane would say they were just lucky, right? I mean, in the sense of what we mean, which is they got hot at the right time. So it's definitely a weird thing.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough because I think, obviously Tanaji is good, and there's a lot of things that you could get a lot of readings and understand a player more defined. But at the end of the day, how a player reacts to pressure, how a player, I think my number one thing, obviously consistency, and then confidence, right? You can't measure confidence, right? So then, does analytics get confidence? I mean, I don't know. I don't know how you can, like, results at the end of the day for an athlete matter.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. For sure.
So it matter more than what analytics wants them to make it matter. But when you're performing, you want something good to come out of it, you know?
Yeah.
So, like, I mean,
That's a tough balance.
It's a tough
for
balance.
sure.
Let's put it that way. It's a tough balance.
And again, speaking of, we've talked some about the, the impact of technology, but you can't really talk about technology without analytics like we're doing and some of the advanced analytics, because you wouldn't be able to do them. Part of the reason you're able to do advanced analytics now is because of technology, not exclusively, because let's face it, Bill James was doing this stuff a long time ago with, paper and pencil. But regardless, it's certainly made it a lot easier. When you think about your own career, and you were, and I'm gonna scout you from back in the day. I'm pretty sure this is right. You were probably you were probably a 4-tool guy at the time. I would say hitting for power was probably the only one of the 5 that you wouldn't have graded out above average. That's why you were a high round pick, and you were a hell of a player, and you made it to the big leagues. Given your skill set then, is there anything about the way that players are sort of evaluated and valued today that would have made your scouting and the perspective on you as a player different now than it would have been in 1991? And maybe the answer is no. I just don't know. I'm just curious, since you're kind of on that side of the table now.
I would like to think in the sense of like I'll be more valued in the sense of like defensively, I think defensively I made a lot of things look a little bit easier than it looked like. I didn't dive for balls. I didn't, I wasn't that kind of, but I would get to balls. And I think when you read it as with the eyes, you can miss some things where analytics you can't.
Yeah.
Like, the technology now with what do you call that? Where they have stadiums. I forget the name.
This is where they break up the field and they got it like in the little areas where they measure range and what
the range and all that stuff. It's called.
Yeah.
I lost my train of thought with that. But anyways, they can see what the value of a player is more like accurately.
Right.
Where eyes sometimes deceive you. They like the guy that dived, the guy, was aggressive like that. And
it might have just been because he didn't read the ball that well, to your point. Like, it might have been because he just didn't read the ball that well, right? I mean, he had to dive because he couldn't get there without diving. Right.
Exactly. So I think in that aspect, maybe, but in another sense, I mean, it would be hard to tell what if it would have been on my favor, or maybe be negative. Who knows?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I was just curious if you'd ever thought about that, since you've been, I think about, my own self. I didn't strike out much, and, I walked a lot, and at one point that was valued, and now I'm not so sure that's valued anymore. It's kind of changed in the sense of the way that's shaking out, because as soon as everybody starts valuing that, well, that becomes less valuable. So you look for something else, right? It's the way it goes.
Hard hit rate.
Yeah.
How consistently does a guy make hard contact?
Yeah.
And that's the thing now. But like baseball is always going to evolve, right? It's always evolved. So, what was base running was a big thing. And in like when Ricky Henderson was the base stealer, then it kind of went away from that and the power and, started becoming power has always been a commodity. In the game, but it's like the importance has changed. I think a lot of times now, like what I like about game now is like you see teams that kind of set their rosters with many different types of players.
Right.
Good teams do that. Not everybody has to be a home run.
Right.
Homer hitter. You could have your homer hitter. You could have your line drive hitter. You could have your situational guy. You could have your defensive guy. I think a lot of teams are going back to that kind of stuff.
Right. That's cool.
Yeah.
So let's transition just a bit away from kind of the analytics stuff and we'll swing back to technology, but in the sense of on the nutrition and training side, And with the advent of wearables and some of the stuff that's happening in kind of the consumer market, where is that? What's going on in baseball around that aspect? Are teams getting more? And well, maybe it's two part. It's our teams, I'll say dictating, but are they strongly encouraging players to get more to be more managed around the nutrition and the training side, weight training? I mean, I don't mean hitting. I mean like weight training. Or are the players doing it? I mean, they've always been the ones that have motivated because they wanted to advance their own careers. I'm curious to know what's happening, and are people leveraging technology to do that better? I know they are, but I'm looking for more organizationally. Or are you seeing that kind of across the board, or does it still depend on where a guy is and who he's playing for?
I think universally in the game, I think, nutrition and weight training and, functional, especially functional weight training, has taken over in the sense of, obviously, you have all these, technology stuff that, you can read how much rest you get.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, all of the, the sort of the measured, you can quantify it all,
You quantify all how this guy moves. How does he move weight, how fast he's moving weight, which translates into power. And that's, definitely all teams are doing that. Most teams, some teams do it better than others, but yeah.
Right. And obviously, I mean, given what I know about Boris and what you do, because you and I have talked, right? That's also still something that's outside the organization, right? The players have a vested interest in maximizing their own performance, regardless of whether their organization helps them with that or not. Correct? I mean, that was always true and will always be true, right?
No doubt.
Because you're not. I mean, the fact you play for the Boston Red Sox, I mean, it's fans don't necessarily want to hear this, but you're a Major League Baseball player first, and you play for the Red Sox, not I'm a Red Sox player, right? Because you know that you might not be playing for them next year, depending on the circumstances of your contract and those sorts of things. And that's, at the end of the day, you are responsible for your own career, not the Red Sox.
Yeah, exactly. I think a lot of times it's hard for players, especially when they get into pro ball, to understand that, because as you're growing up,
it's never been that way, right? You play for a team your entire life until you get to pro ball,
Exactly. So you're the in all of, with the team you get drafted in, and this is the team that I want. It doesn't always necessarily work out that way. Well, more time than not, right? Yeah. There's only a handful of players that play their whole careers with one team. You understand, then the business part of it comes in, and it's just a lot of avenues, or the business part from the team, or from the player. The player gets a choice after a ton of years.
Yeah.
Or the team decides, okay, we value this guy better at this position, so we can move this guy because he has value, or whatever the case may be. So,
one of the interesting things about baseball that again, a lot of things, but one that's interesting, I think, and you see this in other professional sports as well, is the advent, or really the growth in the number of non-baseball playing people who, first off, and in an interesting way, really kind of came in at a very high level, right? In the front office, either as analysts or even at the GM level. I mean, it quickly moved from assistant GMs to GMs being guys that, not only didn't play professional baseball, some of them, I think, barely played high school baseball, right? They're math guys, right? At the end of the day, that they really were not baseball guys. And I guess I'm curious, how much has that migrated down into the sport? Are you seeing that at lower levels now? And are they having a role outside of the front office and even more into some of, I'll call it coaching, but in sort of maybe coaching auxiliary in terms of helping coaches even at lower levels in pro ball?
Yeah, no, definitely 100%. Yeah, because what happens when the analytics have started trickling down into the minor leagues, they've had to have people that could
translate it, understand it,
and then the coaches need to understand it too. So that's the sad part about that part of it, is that a lot of good baseball people get taken out of the game because they don't grasp.
They couldn't adjust.
Right. That's
analytics, and then those guys get taken out, which is a detriment, I think, sometimes to the players, because there's nothing else that you can it's so important to have people that have gone those steps already.
Yeah, I mean, experience, right? I mean, you're talking about wisdom, accumulated wisdom and experience. I mean, I think about like a guy like Elrod Hendricks when we were with the Orioles. I mean, he'd been around baseball forever. Like, whether he understood analytics today or not, like, he's a guy you'd want to be around your young players, right? Whether he could ever figure out what OPS plus was or any of that shit wouldn't matter. Like, his value is different than that.
Yeah, his value is different than that, because he could go to the story. Okay, I'm 0 for 20. And he would go to a story, man, you know what? When I was playing with the Orioles and I was going to a great streak, and all of a sudden I couldn't get a hit. It gave you like a sense of, okay, it's not the end of the world.
I'm not the only one that this has ever happened to.
One that goes that.
Because that's what it feels like at the time.
Go through that.
Yeah.
You get what I'm saying?
Yep.
So those things, when they can't, when players, and I'm not trying to bag on, these players, I mean, these coaches that didn't play, or they're very good at, transition the analytics to the players, and
no, that's nowadays a huge value, right? I mean,
it's a huge value, but then the other value gets taken away because that player never gets those stories where they can kind of push through certain situations, and not feel so bad, because you know as much as me how the game of baseball makes you feel bad about yourself.
Yeah, it is. I've tried to explain that to people. Like, I got buddies who like golf, and they're like, golf is such a, it's so mental. I'm like, you have no idea. Like, I get it, because there's some weird things about golf. You're completely on your own. The ball never moves. It just kind of stares at you. But there's nothing like and with due respect to my friends who are pitchers, being a hitter is the hardest thing, 100%. Like, it's not even close. And when you're struggling, it infects the rest of your game. Like, it makes everything harder when you're not going well. Like, we're not going to talk about sports psychology, but I know that that's also something that there's been a big shift. It was already starting a little bit when we were in our early days, but I know that that's picked up and in a good way, because like you just said, I mean, this is, you got to have, everybody needs a shrink who's playing professional baseball. Like, it's just too hard. It's too hard mentally to deal with. So, all right, well, let's go to kind of where you are today. Let's talk a little bit about what you're up to now that you're an old has-been. Although I saw you taking some cuts on Instagram recently. Looks like you still got it. You're ready for the old timers game. I like that. That was impressive.
I always mess with the guys because just to give them a little taste.
Let you know I can still play, boys.
I know what I'm talking about.
I know a thing or two.
I still do what you guys do, It gets harder and harder as the years go by.
Get sore and sore the next day, like your ribs are hurting, and you try to play it off like it's not happening.
Yeah, I get you.
You just out of my mouth. That's exactly what I do.
So let's talk about your current role at Boras. Not everybody on this podcast is going to know who Scott Boras is. If you follow baseball, he's a living legend. If you don't follow baseball, you have no idea who he is. So give us kind of a quick thumbnail sketch of the Boras Agency and what your role is there.
Well, obviously we represent players. We only represent players.
Only baseball?
Baseball players. Only baseball.
Okay.
Only baseball players. And, Scott's been doing it close to 40 years. And he was always my agent.
I was going to ask. I thought he was, but I couldn't remember. So.
Yeah. He was always my agent. Well, I didn't have an agent in the draft. It was just me, my dad, and my brother. But a year into it, a bunch of agents approached me, but they approached me, and how they caught my eye was, the importance of what information they provide to help my career, right? And that always stood out for me, because that's what was important to me. Getting the glove, getting the glove, getting the spikes, and getting the stuff, for me, was not important. My important thing was how what can they provide for me information wise to move forward, and also in the business side of the game, because I know that when it comes to sports, and then money comes in and all that stuff, so you need to know what to do and what how to deal with things in that aspect, and they pointed that out to me. So I all my career I was there through Major League Baseball, through Japan, and then he's always wanted me to work for him after I stopped playing, but then I wanted to test out the this coaching part of the game.
Right.
And then I got to a point where this being a coach or front office is a lot of time consuming. So I wanted to, not to say this part of it, the game is not time consuming, but I have way more
flexibility
to have a family, which I have now. So
right.
that was my most important thing that I wanted to do. So anyways, now we have a facility down in Miami that our clients come in and they work out. So I oversee that, and
And that's a training facility in Miami. There's another one on the West Coast, right? Or there are three? Is there two?
There's two, one on the West Coast and one here in Miami.
Okay. And you have, I assume, a set of clients who live in the off season nearby and can train regularly.
Train here, or guys come down and spend the off season in South Florida, and they come in.
Right. Okay. And so, and your role there, you help at the facility. What do you? I'm assuming that's mostly in the off season, or do you do that year round when there are guys that are hurt or rehabbing or?
Yeah, sometimes we have guys. Well, we have strength coaches and stuff like that. So then, we're here for those guys to train and to do things that they need to do to get ready for the next season. And so I oversee that, and I do some baseball stuff on the field with the guys, because they have a field and cages out here. So I do that. And then during the season, mostly, just seeing the guys when they come through Miami, or maybe seeing a guy when they get called up or anything like that. So
gotcha. So you're a resource for the current players already, and then a big chunk of the work is in the off season in terms of managing the facility. I mean, it's year round, because you could potentially have guys there all year round depending on injuries or whatever. But it's more focused. It's full time right now. I'm assuming now that the season's over, except for the guys that are in the in the playoffs. But and the minor league guys, well, they still have instructional league, right? So if the guys aren't in instructional, are they there?
Way less time than we had it. I mean, it's only like 4 weeks or something like that.
They figured that out, that having guys play all the time is a bad idea. Is that what you're saying, Alex?
Yeah, I never got that, but whatever. Yeah.
Hey, let's just let this guy play 400 games a year and let's see how that works out. Yeah.
It's so funny because the other day I was talking to the guys about winter ball, and talking about winter ball, and we're talking about, they're gonna go for 3 weeks and this like that. And I'm like, man, it's incredible. I would have to say I played like 4 years in a row, 3 months after the season ended.
No, I know. I mean, it was basically, if you were good, if you were doing well, they just punished you by making you play all the time. I mean, I understand the idea, which was we want to play against better competition, and we want them to keep, getting at bats and improving and whatever. But like, there's a physical, like, there's a reason you have an off season, right? is to recover, right? I mean, it's common sense in a lot of ways.
It's to recover and to get stronger, right?
Yes.
So you can maintain that following
through 162 game season plus playoffs, which is what the ultimate goal is, right?
Because if you think about us, we went to Hawaiian Winter League after we played a full. Well, you didn't play. You got drafted that year, and then we went to Hawaii.
Yeah, but I played college, so I mean, I remembered. I calculated. I played 200 and something games that year, something crazy.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
I think it's nuts.
Yeah.
Like what they made us do back in the day. I'm saying it's funny. I look at my at-bats, but then I don't have at-bats calculated for all those winter ball.
Yeah. I mean,
technically I had another 1,000 at-bats.
Yeah, my kids were, it's funny. This came up recently. My daughter had a friend over. She doesn't live with us anymore, but she lives close by and came by to watch the football game this weekend. And her friend dad likes baseball or something. So she was like, "Oh, you played baseball? Tell me, when did you play? Blah blah blah." And she's like, and my daughter was like, "How many baseball games do you think you played?" And I was like, and my number pales in comparison to yours, but I was like, "Oh, I mean, it was more than 1,000." Because before I said anything, she's like, "What? Like maybe 200 or 300?" And I started laughing. I was like, no. And, and I was going back to like Little League, and I'm like, it's probably between 1,000 and 1,500. And that's probably wrong because I don't know how many scrimmage games I played. I don't know how many whatever. And then for you, a guy that had a 15, 18-year career in Major League Baseball, like it's just, especially the way it was then, it's really hard to fathom.
And that's another thing, like, how technology has changed even in the minor leagues, right? Guys get scheduled days off.
Yeah. Well, I saw now where they have 1 day off a week. I mean, they only play 6 days a week,
They only play 6 days a week because they modeled it like in Japan. Japan, that's how it's modeled, right?
Oh, that's a
great idea.
It's a better model for sure. Yeah.
It's a way better model. It's so funny that my adjustment when I went to Japan, obviously a ton of adjustments because it's a different culture, but that was a big thing for me because I was so used to playing every day, and you're thinking, okay, rhythm. I don't want to lose my rhythm. I get that day off, and man, I was good, and then I had the day off, and then the next day, I'm still trying to feel out until you get used to that. And It's like the best thing in the world.
Yeah, because then you take the day and you really make it a day off. Like you try to like step away. Yeah.
Exactly. But now they have those days and still scheduled days off for their guys.
Yeah.
Which never existed. We played no matter what.
I mean, if you weren't hurt, the coach is like, I'm putting the best players out there, period.
Only way you'll get a day off is the manager, you have some kind of compassionate manager that will be like, you know what, he looks tired.
Yeah, there aren't many of them, and there weren't many of those.
I played 130. I mean, we played 140 games. I played either 137 or 138 games a year, every year in the minor leagues.
I believe it. I mean, I believe it. I mean, fortunately, you were durable because, I mean, and it does, there's a couple, I want to be mindful of time because we're getting close here. I mean, we could talk all afternoon. I'd love to do this. I mean, last time we were together, I think we talked for 2 hours and didn't stop. So there's no reason why we couldn't keep going. But a couple things to wrap up to get us on our way here. A couple of things that, when I think about one question I have in my mind as I've watched baseball, particularly last decade, 10, maybe 15 years, but certainly the past 10, there's been such an increase in pitching velocity, average pitching velocity, and certainly at the margin, at the high end. I mean, the average pitching velocity is just dramatically different than it was when you got into baseball, right? I mean, if a guy threw mid 90s in the early 90s, that sounds weird, but if you threw 94, 95, you threw really hard. Like, yeah, I mean, there were not that many guys that threw. A lot of guys threw 90, 90, 91. There were hardly any guys that threw 94, 95, and above 95 was like a unicorn. Like, I mean, there were like three of those guys. There was Paul Shuey was the only guy I ever played who threw 97, 98, right? And it was like people would come to watch the guy because it was like they'd never seen anybody before or since throw that hard. Guy named Paul Shuey.
Okay. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Nasty split.
Oh yeah, and he threw hard as hell. I mean, you mean for me? But now that's like a Tuesday. It's like a regular thing. What do you attribute that to? And where kind of to that? Where is this video technology piece feedback loop part of it in terms of, is this a differential mechanics? Have people learned how to throw harder? Because I can't imagine it's because people are bigger and stronger necessarily.
Training.
Okay.
Training.
And is this also partially related to the injury rate? I mean, there's so many more Tommy John surgeries. It's got to go together, right?
I think so. That's my opinion. My opinion is the strength training has changed a ton, right? From a young age. But then that's the part where I think it's affected. I mean, that's just my opinion. It affected guys getting hurt so much because you're starting from a young age, super young age, being very, instead of going to play ball in your, in a park and, just playing with your friends and stuff like that. These guys are going out and having strength training, doing all the stuff that you do when you're in pro ball at 13, 14.
Right. Too young, really, probably. I mean, in a lot of ways. Yeah.
In my opinion, people argue the opposite, right? But I think it is, because at the end of the day, your body needs to develop to a certain point. Then I think you go at it.
Right.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, that was just a question. I mean, I had theories in my head, but was curious what y'all's perspective on it was.
This I have, we were talking about 138, whatever, how many games. I don't remember a ton of injuries in the minor leagues with guys. I don't remember that. I mean, maybe you do.
No, I don't. Other than, it always seemed like there's always like one or two guys who seem to be hurt all the time. But I wasn't real sure, like, were they hurt or were they injured? Like, some guys just, didn't deal with aches and pains as well as others, I think. So.
Yeah. No, but I'm just saying, like, the core players that we play with coming up as Curtis Goodwin, all these guys, we all played that many games.
And didn't get hurt.
And never got hurt.
Yeah.
I never remember going, oh, this guy was in rehab, going down to Gulf Coast for 2 months to rehab to come and join the team again.
Right.
That didn't exist.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't imagine it being, guys just played hurt then.
I don't think so. No, I don't think so either.
I think it's probably the classic of, when you push anything to the red zone, like if you push to its limit, right? You may not know where that limit is, and you're more likely to hurt yourself. And that's where, and then you migrate those techniques down. I mean, what's good for someone who's a 19-year-old body or a 21-year-old body, the assumption that that's good for someone who's 18 may be true, maybe 17, maybe not the same for 16 or 15. And then you've got specialization, which has gotten thrown in, which now you're talking about repetitive motion issues, right? Where, when I was a kid, there was no such thing as year-round baseball. You could not do it. And I'm not even sure in Miami when you were growing up there was, even though you could, right? I mean, we couldn't do it for us because of the weather. I mean, I was in Nashville, Tennessee, so it's not like the weather was bad, but I mean, it was cold in the winter. Like you played basketball in the winter, right? You went inside. That's what you did, right?
The other day, we were talking about playing, I played only my season.
Yeah.
Whatever season it was, I played that season. I didn't play baseball.
Right. You put the glove away and you picked up the football in the fall and then you picked up the basketball or whatever, and you
never played organized other sports, but I played it with my friends in the park.
In the park, yeah.
Maybe baseball. My brother, with a broomstick and a made up ball and those kind of things. But like organized team, I had once a year.
Yeah.
Same with me. I mean, travel baseball did not exist until you were 16 in high school. And basically it was only if you were going to be good enough to go play in college. Like, and they asked you to play. It wasn't the other way around. It wasn't because mom and dad could write a check or whatever. I mean, it was, it was a small number of people that did it because of that. So,
no doubt.
Anyway, all right, man, we could keep going, but I told you, before we jumped on, I wanted to ask you kind of a question, sort of a translation question to business. And you spend a lot of time in pro ball, but as you think about a non-sports person, if they were to ask you for advice, I mean, one thing that's clear is there's no place on earth, there's no organizations on earth like professional sports where the stakes are as high in terms of identifying talent and then developing talent, right? Because that's what the whole shooting match is. You can make an argument that the big consulting firms or law firms or whatever, but realistically, they don't have minor leagues. They're depending on Stanford or Harvard or whoever to do the heavy lifting, and then they'll pick it up from there, right? So the talent identification problem is a little bit different. As you think about your career, what are some lessons that you have seen that, again, they can't be baseball specific. It can't be figure out how, find a guy's got a good slider, but there may be some comparative, like where do you feel like, as you think about both your experience at Boris and what you saw as a coach and a player, what are some lessons that you would tell someone, hey, when you're thinking about trying to find people who can be your best players over time, like your stalwarts, what would you look for? If you were going to start a business today, what would you look for?
Obviously you're looking for talent, but also like consistency in their work, consistency, drive, passion. Um, I mean, I always think hard work. It's an old saying, whatever hard work always pays. But like I always think the hard work, the person that um, makes it a priority to do their job well, um, is the person that obviously when they have talent that flourishes big time, regardless if they're learning in the process, but that will take them to where you want them to be,
Yeah.
because talent itself, I've seen it come and go, right?
Yeah.
A super guy with a super talent, maybe he's super smart at the thing, but he doesn't have the discipline and work ethic. It fades, and those are
So related question, and I think it's an interesting one. We'll end on this one. Baseball's an unusual sport in that it's a team sport that has a very strong individual component. So how do you think about when you think about the best teammates you had? Why would you say they were your best teammates in the sense of being good teammates? What was it about them that made them great teammates?
good question. I think relatable to people. Open-mindedness. So like for me, one of my favorite, obviously he's a Hall of Famer, but besides him being a great player, Barry Larkin has to be my favorite teammate of all, because he was able to not only use his success playing, but like him being like the leader of different people that come from different places, and kind of bring those guys together, people together. Was able to kind of try to relate to go out of his way to relate to people from different walks of life. Obviously you have Latin Americans, you have Asians, you have all kinds of different
Yeah.
people that come to you play with, but he identified like little things that would he would go out of his way to kind of make everybody feel comfortable.
Gotcha. Okay, because when I think about business, it's more like baseball than it is like football, in the sense that in football, it's a true team sport in a lot of ways, right? You can have 10 guys that do everything right, and if one messes up, the play's blown, right? And in baseball, that there's situations where that can happen, but it's different, right? And you've got, the pitcher's out there by himself. Yeah, he can make a great play, can make a great pitch, and someone can hit a dinker and get a hit, or he can make a terrible pitch and someone can make a great play and save him. But hitting in particular, like, you're on your own, man. Like, it's, you're out there, you're a long way from everybody, and no one's going to help you, right? It is what, so it's got this weird sort of, very strong team and very strong individual aspect to it. And business in many ways is like that, because most people there's an individual contributor part of their job, stuff that they do that's their work, and then they do stuff in teams and as part of the overall business. So it to me, it has a pretty good overlap, and it's it's comparative.
No, I would think so, because you just said it, like hitting, you're on your own. You're against 9 guys, right? By yourself.
Yep. Completely. Yeah.
Completely. Yeah. And the special thing about good teammates like that is be able to kind of like take that aspect, but also understand the team aspect of it is pretty special.
Yeah, and it's two different parts of your brain in a lot of ways, and it's not that's why I think the great ones can bridge that, right? They can do both. They can be both individualistic and team oriented at the same time, right? And that's not always easy to do. So.
It's not easy, and it's not always right to force somebody to be that way.
That's true.
I think there's some people that are like very good at what they do, but they're that's the way they work. They're good at what they do, and that's why there's aspects of different scenarios in different places and different.
Yeah, I mean, and if you're truly individual, you should go play golf, right, or tennis, like where it's just you. I mean, that's it. You don't have to, you don't have to deal with teammates. I mean, not bagging on it. I'm just saying it's a different dynamic.
No doubt, no doubt.
All right. Well, I always like to wrap up with a personal question, then we'll shut her down. So, and I've asked a bunch of people this, so sometimes it's a fun question, sometimes it's not. Feel free to punt if you want to, but tell me about the first technology memory you have as a child, and it can't be watching TV or talking on the phone.
Wow. I can't be watching TV or no video.
No. Video games, it could be a video console or something like that, but it can't be TV. Everybody's got that.
That's cool. Everybody got that. I think. Wow. Good question. And I can't even come up. I'll have to think about this because that's a hard one.
All right, no worries. Last one then. I know you're busy and you got a bunch of shit going on, but tell us, have you read anything or watched anything lately that you think people ought to check out?
I don't know.
Maybe little kids. I was thinking for you, it might be little kid videos. That may be what you're watching.
Oh yeah, well yeah, Frozen. I watched 50 million times now for the last week or something.
Everybody, check out Frozen. It's a really interesting movie.
No, the Dahmer.
It actually is good. So.
Dahmer on Netflix. Dahmer documentary on Netflix.
Oh yeah, have you watched it?
Yeah, I watched it.
Is it creepy? Like I haven't checked it out. So
it's creepy. It's interesting. It's good.
Okay. Good. All right, I'll check it out.
I would watch it for sure. I mean, unless you're like you don't want to watch that kind of stuff, but.
Yeah, if you're not into like that kind of thing, yeah.
If you, I mean, I wouldn't think that's anybody's thing, but if those are things that are interesting to you, no doubt.
Good deal. All right, we'll wrap there and let Alex get back to it. Alex, thanks again, man. I really appreciate the time. Thanks for coming on the podcast.
All right, Bryan, appreciate it. It's been a pleasure, absolutely.
We hope you enjoyed this episode. If you are enjoying the podcast, we'd appreciate it if you would become a subscriber wherever you get your podcasts. And if you could rate and review the show on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, that would really help us out. Or you can just go old school and tell your friends, your family, your colleagues, and hell, anybody else who you think might want to hear something like this to listen in. If you're on social media, make sure to follow us on Twitter. Our handle is @cuttheshit_pod. We are also on TikTok @cuttheshitpod, all one word, where we post lots of clips from the podcast. And last but not least, you can also watch the YouTube version of the show on our YouTube channel @Plow Networks. Until next time, take care and have a great day.